There are moments in life when a person feels pulled into the whirlpool of lack, anxiety, and debt. Yet hidden behind all that suffering lies a profound truth. Your eternal inheritance has never been lost. The parable of the prodigal son is not merely an ancient story, but a spiritual map showing the way back to the inexhaustible source of good. This is the journey of a double inheritance, where every soul discovers both the visible riches and the invisible treasures within, through stories, principles, and concrete practices. This path will reveal to you how to step out of the distant land, break free from the hypnosis of poverty, and return to the abundant banquet of life. Introduction: the meaning of the parable and the concept of the double inheritance. Among the treasures of spiritual imagery preserved in the scriptures, few stories are at once as simple and yet as profound as the parable of the prodigal son. Many read it and see only a moral tale, a reminder about repentance and forgiveness. But to stop there is to touch only the surface. In truth, this parable is a map for the soul's journey. The process every person undergoes when drifting away and then rediscovering their divine essence. Hidden within every detail of the parable is a vital truth. You and I carry within us a double inheritance. Not only the material assets of this world, but also the inexhaustible inner treasure where divine law and the abundance of God forever dwell. This double inheritance is the foundation for understanding every teaching about life, prosperity, and freedom. One part belongs to the visible world where you work, build, earn, accumulate, and use resources. The other is the invisible inheritance, an eternal treasure of consciousness, untouched by time, markets, fortune, or circumstance. The world may change. Currency may lose its value. Opportunities may close. But the invisible inheritance within you has never been lost. It waits to be unlocked the moment you remember who you truly are. The parable does not merely tell the story of a son leaving home. It mirrors the process of the mind wandering away from truth. When the son left his father's house, he did not lose his inheritance because it was taken away, but because he forgot his origin. He wasted his wealth because he did not realize that his own consciousness was the key that kept the treasure flowing. So it is with humanity today. We have not truly lost abundance. We have simply forgotten our divine identity and believed we must live as beggars in a universe of plenty. It is this forgetting that produces pain. Pain does not arise from events, hardships, or the numbers written in a ledger of debt. Pain is born of the belief that we are cut off from the infinite source. Once the soul accepts this illusion of separation, fear sets in, followed by doubt, calculation, and anxiety. And these very thoughts weave the reality of lack. Outwardly, the world sees debt and failure. But at the core, there is only one cause, the consciousness of separation. When we read the parable, we see the son fall to the lowest point, living among swine and craving the husks they ate. This image portrays not only material poverty, but also symbolizes the state of consciousness when a person identifies with limitation. In that moment, he forgot he was a son, forgot he had the right of inheritance, and lived as a stranger in his own home. But the story does not end there. For one day he remembered the instant he said to himself that even the servants in his father's house had bread enough and to spare. His destiny shifted. That moment shows us that the key to transformation does not lie in outer circumstances, but in the inner recognition of the double inheritance. What then does this double inheritance mean for us today? It means that wherever you stand in life, you always hold two parallel sources of supply. One is what you currently possess, your work, your skills, your money, your property. The other is the invisible wealth, the radiance of wisdom, the flow of ideas, the wellspring of creative energy within the world may strip you of the first, but the second can never be touched. And it is this second inheritance that generates, sustains, and restores the first. When you awaken to the truth that you are a son, that the inner inheritance has never been lost, then all that is outward begins to adjust itself in harmony. The crucial lesson is to see yourself not as a debtor, but as an heir. If you think your life is limited to your job, your paycheck, or a stroke of luck, you are only perceiving half of reality. The greater portion is the invisible inheritance, the certainty that you were born to live in abundance. Once you reconnect with this awareness, doors begin to open. You discover solutions, ideas, and help that once escaped your notice. And that is when the double inheritance comes alive. Think of yourself right now. Perhaps you are worried about an expense, an unfinished contract, or an uncertain future. Yet if you look deeper, you will see that you still possess an invisible treasure. It is your ability to think, your imagination, your patience, your relationships, your faith. Above all, it is your unbreakable connection to the source of all good. The moment you remember this, fear dissolves and a strange peace begins to flow through you. The parable of the prodigal son is not merely the story of one individual returning home. It is a universal reminder that no one has ever truly lost their inheritance. It has never left you. It has only been hidden behind the clouds of doubt and fear. Once you clear those clouds with recognition, you will see that the sun has never ceased to shine. This double inheritance is yours, not by merit, not by reward, but by identity. You are a son, and a son always has an inheritance. Therefore, the opening of this journey is an affirmation. You are not lacking, you are not abandoned, and you have never lost your inheritance. All of this has been nothing but a lesson to awaken you. Step into this story with the awareness that you are also the son in the parable, and the Father's banquet awaits your return, not by the movement of your feet, but by the transformation of your mind. When you remember the double inheritance, you will know that you have never truly been poor. You are only on your way home, where everything still waits intact for you. The pain born of the belief in separation, there is a truth few ever realize. Pain is not born from events, but from the feeling of being cut off. When a door closes, when a bill remains unpaid, when a relationship begins to fracture, what truly weighs on your heart is not the event itself, but the thought that you are facing it alone. Just as in the parable, the son did not suffer merely because his money was gone or because he was in a foreign land. He suffered because he believed he had lost his place in the Father's house. That belief in separation wounded him more deeply than hunger ever could. And you are the same. How many times in your life has your pain not come from the loss itself, but from the belief that you were abandoned, that life no longer stood behind you? In reality, no separation has ever occurred. God has never turned his back. The inheritance has never disappeared. The flow has never ceased. Yet when the mind sinks into fear, it builds a veil. And through that veil, you see only lack. You believe in the darkness instead of the light. And because of that belief, your entire experience mirrors emptiness. Pain, then, is not in the circumstance, but in the thought. And thoughts can be changed. Pause for a moment and ask yourself this. Has there ever been a day when, in the midst of busyness, you suddenly felt uneasy for no clear reason, as if everything around you might collapse at any moment? That is the echo of the belief in separation. In that moment, you were not lacking money. You had not lost anyone, but you carried the thought in your heart that you were no longer protected. And that thought created a vague fear If you have ever felt that, know this, you are not alone, and you are not mistaken. You are simply standing before an opportunity to realize the truth that you have never been separated from the source of life. So it is with economic suffering. When someone says, I am in debt and I cannot pay, what they are truly saying is, I have forgotten that I am the child of abundance. When someone says, I am unemployed, they are silently confessing, I have lost my worth. And when one says, I have nothing left to hold on to, deep inside, they believe the Father has forsaken them. This is the illusion of separation, and it is the real root of all tragedy. The beauty of the parable is that it reminds us this separation exists only in imagination. The son was never erased from the family line, never stripped of his right as a child. He had only forgotten, and when he remembered, when he chose to return, the Father's arms had never closed. Forgiveness required no delay. Acceptance carried no condition, because he had never lost his place in that house. In the same way, you do not need to beg to be restored to your invisible inheritance. You need only remember that it is still there. Here lies a subtle lesson. The sense of separation often grows quietly in the silence of daily life. In those moments when you let worry whisper in your ear, every time you repeat to yourself that you are not enough, you are laying another brick in the wall of separation. One day you find yourself standing before that wall and believing it to be real. But imagine this one new thought, one affirmation that I am a child, I have the right of inheritance, and the wall begins to crack and the light floods in once more. Ask yourself right now, how many times have you let the thought of separation govern your life? How many times have you looked into your wallet and believed that was all you had, forgetting that your supply does not reside in a wallet? How many times have you looked at your circumstances and thought you were alone, forgetting that you are surrounded by infinite love? I want to ask you, will you dare to believe, even in this very moment, that your pain does not come from what you lost, but from the belief that you have been separated from the source of life? If your answer is yes, then you already hold the key to change. Thank you for being here, for listening to this message. Your very presence proves that you still long to rediscover the truth, that you still believe in a path of return. Do not take that longing lightly, for it is the call of the double inheritance, the voice of the invisible treasure within you, reminding you that you have never truly been poor, never truly been alone. Remember this, your pain is not a final sentence. It is only the shadow of a mistaken thought, and that shadow can vanish the moment you choose to look back toward the light. When you affirm that you are not separated, you will feel the strength of return, and in that very instant, the banquet has begun its preparation. Arms are already outstretched, and a seat has long been waiting for you at the table. Chapter 1, The Inheritance That Was Never Lost. In the letter to the Ephesians, there is a simple affirmation that contains a universe of truth. In him, we have obtained an inheritance, being predestined according to the purpose of him who works all things. This is not a promise of some future inheritance, nor a condition that says, if you do well enough, if you work hard enough, if you accumulate enough merit, then you will receive it. These words are written in the past perfect tense, meaning that the inheritance is already given, already established, already rooted in the deepest essence of who you are from the very beginning. No one can bestow it upon you, and no one can take it away. True wealth is not gold, silver, or land, but the unchanging qualities of spirit, just like love, wisdom, and peace. Abundance is part of human nature itself. You may forget it. You may deny it. You may cover it beneath layers of doubt, but you cannot lose it. Just as the sun does not disappear because clouds cover it, this inheritance remains. awaiting the moment you are brave enough to part the clouds. The world often teaches that wealth comes from labor, from markets, from competition and calculation, but truth speaks differently. Wealth comes from consciousness, from the image you hold within your mind. One who believes himself poor will think, act, and feel as a poor man, and his surroundings will confirm that belief. One who knows he is a son, that in the Father's house there is always abundance, will live with a sense of wholeness, and the world will reflect that abundance back to him. This is not mysticism. It is the law of mind in operation. During times of economic depression, many have proven this truth. A merchant in New York, drowning in debt and harassed by creditors, chose to change one thing alone, the way he thought about himself. Each morning, his simple prayer was, "Father, in your house there is bread enough, and I lack nothing." He did not borrow. He did not cheat. He did not seek loopholes. He only kept before his mind the image of sufficiency in the Father's house. And within weeks, orders began to flow again. Forgotten payments were sent, and his business revived. The only change was in consciousness, and when consciousness changes, the world cannot help but change with it. That inheritance which was never lost lies within you. It is not in a bank, not in a legal document, not subject to the swings of the economy. It lives in the truth that you are the channel through which abundance flows. When you live with that conviction, for you no longer plead or wait, you simply receive what is already yours. The prodigal son thought he had lost everything, but in reality, his right as a son remained untouched. When he returned, the father did not say, "You must work to earn it back." The father only prepared a feast, because the inheritance had never been erased. This truth changes the way you understand prayer. Prayer is not the weak begging of a pauper hoping for charity. Prayer is the bold affirmation of a son remembering his authority. It is not asking to have, but thanking because it is already given. It is not pleading to be rescued, but declaring that you were never separated. In such prayer, you are not trying to change the will of heaven. You are changing your own mind to see the truth. If true wealth is consciousness, then the first step in touching your inheritance is to change the image you hold of yourself. You cannot go on thinking of yourself as small, inadequate, dependent, and yet expect to live in abundance. The thought you sow is the thought you reap. Replace the image of the beggar with the image of the heir. See yourself entering the Father's house. See the banquet already set. Hear the Father's voice saying, "Son, all that I have is yours." Repeat this image daily, and you will witness its power transforming every circumstance. Some will object and say, "But I have not seen it. I have not touched it. I have no evidence." But faith does not wait for evidence. Faith creates evidence. Belief is the bridge, connecting your finite mind with the infinite inheritance that is already yours. And as you step onto that bridge, what is unseen begins to take form. What lived only in thought becomes the fabric of your experience. The inheritance that was never lost is not a comforting notion. It is the foundation for a new way of living. When you remember, you no longer live in fear. You act with the confidence of one who knows he has a secure place in the universe. You no longer bargain with life. You begin to co-create with it. You no longer scavenge for scraps. You sit at the banquet that has been prepared for you from the beginning. Let this truth be etched into your heart. You are a son, and your inheritance has never been lost. Every sense of lack is only temporary, only the shadow of a mistaken belief. Once you change that belief, the shadow dissolves and the true light shines forth. You need not wait for a miracle to appear outside of you, for the greatest miracle is the awakening within. And from that awakening, The outer miracles will follow as a natural consequence. The inheritance has never been lost, and now is the time to remember. When you remember, you will see that you have never truly been poor, never truly been alone. You are only relearning an ancient lesson. You are a child of abundance, and all that the Father has is already yours. The practice of visualization and affirmative prayer, if the inheritance has never been lost and abundance is part of your very identity, then what is required is to open a path by which your consciousness can once again touch that treasure. That path is the practice of visualization and affirmative prayer. This is not some elaborate religious ritual, nor the mechanical repetition of words. It is the art of reshaping the image of yourself, bringing the mind back to the truth that you are a child of sufficiency. When you visualize, you are restructuring your inner world. When you affirm in prayer, you are engraving upon the subconscious an unchangeable truth. And when the two are combined, an invisible power begins to move, producing change. In your lived experience, imagine yourself standing before a great house, light streaming from every window. Now, BANQUET, prepare. Everything orderly and abundant. That house is not some faraway place, but the symbol of the divine consciousness within you. As you enter it in your imagination, you are reminding your mind that this is where you truly belong. In that vision, feel every detail, the chair waiting for you, the lamp glowing, the cupboards full. Do not regard this as fantasy, but as a memory awakening, for in truth, this has been your house from the beginning. Affirmative prayer works with visualization as seed works with soil. Visualization alone may slip into idle daydreaming. Affirmation alone may grow rigid and dry. But the union of both becomes power when you close your eyes and say, Father, I thank you that in your house there is bread enough, and I lack nothing. Let those words echo together with the image of stepping into the radiant house. The harmony between spoken truth and mental image persuades the subconscious, and when the subconscious believes, reality itself begins to shift. Many fail in prayer because they continue to hold the image of themselves as poor. They repeat phrases endlessly, but inwardly see themselves as helpless, and this is like sowing seed upon stone. There is no ground for it to take root. But when you change the inner picture, when you see yourself as the heir, then affirmation becomes like rain upon fertile soil, and the harvest is inevitable. Remember, affirmative prayer is not begging. Beggars plead, but heirs affirm. Beggars wait for pity. Heirs receive what already belongs to them. When you pray, take your stand as a child, not in fear, but in gratitude and conviction. Speak with calm certainty. As one confirming an obvious truth, there is a simple exercise anyone can practice. Each morning before the day pulls you into its demands. Sit quietly for 5 minutes. Close your eyes. Breathe steadily and visualize the Father's house. See its shining rooms, the tables laden, the storerooms overflowing. When that image is vivid, whisper an affirmation. Father, I thank you that I have my portion in this inheritance. I lack nothing. I am nourished. I am secure. Repeat it with gratitude, without haste, without strain. Let the words flow like a gentle stream through the mind. If you practice faithfully, anxiety will gradually dissolve. Thoughts of lack will lose their grip, replaced by a new foundation, the assurance that supply can never run dry. From this foundation, your actions too will transform, no longer making decisions from fear, but from faith, no longer grasping at every chance in desperation, but calmly choosing what is right, no longer haunted by loss, but certain that the flow will always continue. In practice, there is a vital principle. Do not cling to outward details. In prayer, you need not dictate how God will provide, who will bring it, or what numbers must appear. Your task is to hold the image of abundance and affirm the truth that you are already inheriting it. The channels, the timing, the form that is the work of divine law. By releasing control, you open the way for good to come through unexpected doors. You will be astonished at the changes that follow. A debt that seemed impossible may be renegotiated. A job opportunity may appear suddenly. An old acquaintance may bring good news. These are not outside miracles. They are the natural consequences of the inner miracle. When you change your image and affirm the truth, the world cannot help but reflect it. The greatest wonder is not that more material wealth flows, but that your soul is set free. You begin to live in liberty, no longer fearing tomorrow. You know that though the world may change, your inheritance does not. And as you live in this certainty, you radiate a peace that strengthens others. That is the moment when you are not only inheriting the treasure, but becoming a channel through which it flows to others. The practice of visualization and affirmative prayer is the simple yet powerful way to return to the Father's house each day. You do not need to wait until despair drives you to it. Treat it as spiritual breath, as essential nourishment. And as you remain faithful to this practice, a day will come when within you rises an unshakable conviction: I have never lost my inheritance. I am living in the abundance of the Father, and I lack nothing. Chapter 2, The Distant Land, the Hypnosis of Poverty. The distant land in the parable is not a location on a map, but a state of mind. When the son left his father's house, he did not merely step away from a home, he stepped away from principle, away from truth. That separation carried him into a distant land where the soul forgets its origin and becomes hypnotized by the illusion of lack. This is the very condition in which many live today. They are not poor because the universe is depleted, but because their minds have surrendered to false belief. Poverty does not begin in the wallet. It begins in thought. History has given us striking evidence of this phenomenon. The economic crash of 1929 was not merely the collapse of the stock market. It was the collapse of belief. In the years preceding it, millions had convinced themselves that wealth came from gambling, speculation, and the game of numbers. Few remembered principle. Few remembered that true prosperity must be rooted in service, integrity, and harmony with law. When the collective belief wandered from the source, collapse became inevitable. It was not punishment, but the natural consequence of a mind turned away from truth. The same is true in the individual life. When you drift from awareness of your divine identity, you too step into a distant land. There, every thought becomes wasteful. You spend energy on worry, on comparison, on judgment, on doubt. These thoughts are like counterfeit coins appearing to have value, but purchasing nothing real. The more you use them, the more exhausted you become, until at last you find yourself with nothing to lean on. This is the hypnosis of poverty. The mind, convinced it has lost its source and that the world contains only lack, this hypnosis spreads rapidly. A single pessimistic headline can sow unease in thousands of minds. One friend's complaint can ignite a chain of negative thoughts in your own. Slowly, the shared atmosphere becomes a dark cloud obscuring vision. When everyone thinks in terms of difficulty, when everyone speaks of crisis, then even the most obvious opportunities vanish from sight. Not because they do not exist, but because no one any longer perceives them. Yet the truth stands unchanged. In God, there is no lack. In the source, there is no limitation. Poverty exists only in human imagination when the gaze turns away from light. And because it is only illusion, it can be broken the instant you refuse to believe in it. This does not mean ignoring reality, neglecting debt, refusing to work, or denying responsibility. It means refusing to regard poverty as the final verdict. It means looking directly at it and saying inwardly, "This has no ultimate power, for my supply comes from a higher place." Each time you repeat that thought, you remove a brick from the wall of hypnosis. Each time you affirm that in the Father there is no lack, you brighten the memory of the double inheritance. This is the path of return, not by footsteps, but by choices of thought. And as you return to true ideas, outer conditions begin to change in response. Many have witnessed this in years of hardship, while neighbors despaired. There were those who quietly persisted in scientific prayer, holding firmly to the affirmation that they were supplied in full. The result was doors opening in unexpected ways. A store that seemed doomed received new capital. A family that had nothing left was helped at the exact right moment. These changes were not accidents. They were the lawful response when someone dared to refuse the hypnosis of poverty. Therefore, the distant land is not far away. It can appear in a single morning when you wake and let worry rule your mind. It can appear in a glance of comparison, in a careless negative remark, in the thought that you are not enough. But in that very moment, you can also turn back. You can say within yourself, "I do not accept poverty as truth. I choose to remember that in the Father I have all." Such an affirmation may seem simple, but when repeated with faith, it cuts through the spell. The distant land is an illusion, and you need not walk miles to return. You need only stop, refuse to wander further, and turn back in consciousness. When you do, what seemed lost is found again, not because it has returned, but because it never left. All you must do is sweep away the fog of hypnosis, and the light of the inheritance that was never lost will shine once more within you. The power of collective suggestion and the metaphysical denial. There is an unseen but formidable force at work in human life, collective suggestion. It does not appear as a public law, nor does it take a tangible shape. Yet it can envelop an entire society and lead millions into the same state of consciousness. When the press floods the air with pessimistic reports, when conversations in the home are filled with fear and complaint, when everywhere voices repeat that times are hard, the human mind is easily drawn into that atmosphere. Collective suggestion seeps in like a thin mist, entering thought, planting seeds of doubt, and weakening faith. This is hypnosis on a communal scale, where fear multiplies not because of events themselves, but because of the endless repetition of those fears in the collective mind. When collective suggestion gains the upper hand, even the strong can falter. A single newspaper can spread more despair than a single event. A casual word of hopelessness can block more opportunities than the closing of any one door. Those untrained in the life of spirit unconsciously absorb this atmosphere, gradually thinking, deciding, and acting in harmony with what the crowd believes. That is why so many collapse inwardly when their actual circumstances are not yet dire, for they are living under suggestion, not in the truth of spirit. The solution cannot be found in running away or covering one's ears. It must come from a greater power, the metaphysical denial. Metaphysical denial does not mean ignoring events. It means refusing to give them absolute authority. It is the resolute declaration that poverty, fear, and lack are passing appearances, not reality. When you say within yourself, "There is no lack in God," You are not denying facts. You are denying the dominion of false reality. It is an act of courage, for it requires you to look directly at the shadow and affirm that it is not real. Metaphysical denial is the shield that protects the mind from collective hypnosis. Each time you hear someone lament that conditions are beyond hope, whisper within, God is my supply, and in him there is no lack. Each time you read a pessimistic headline, respond, this has no power over me, for I am supplied by the infinite source. Each time fear whispers in your mind that tomorrow will be worse, answer in firm silence, God is here, and where he is, no harm can touch me. In these denials, you are reasserting your sonship and your inheritance. You are telling your subconscious that it is not the world that decides, but divine law. And once the subconscious accepts this message, your entire experience begins to shift. You gradually rise out of the poisoned atmosphere of collective suggestion and stand in truth. At first, metaphysical denial may feel mechanical, almost ritualistic, but be patient, for this is the training of the mind. Just as the body grows strong through repetition, so the mind gains strength through practice. Each denial weakens a fragment of the hypnosis. Each affirmation widens the light within. And one day, you will discover that the freedom within has grown louder than the noise without. This is the power of the inner voice. This is the power of the voice within, not merely a sound you hear, but a space to which you return. It is not just a word that rises and fades, but a sanctuary where you reclaim peace, where false suggestions cannot enter. As you nurture this space daily, you will find yourself surrounded by a different atmosphere, the atmosphere of truth, of prosperity, of peace. Collective suggestion may shake an entire economy, but it cannot touch a soul established in truth. Metaphysical denial may not change the numbers outside overnight, but it changes the consciousness within you, and from there, everything begins to realign, for the world can only reflect what your mind believes. Therefore, when you feel hemmed in by the cloud of pessimism, remember you are not powerless. You have the right to deny, the right to build a spiritual wall against collective hypnosis, and the right to choose a different belief. This is your inheritance, the key to the treasure that was never lost. From that strength, you will stand unshaken amid all turmoil, like a flame that will not be extinguished in the wind, like a house unmoved in the storm, for you know that collective suggestion is but a shadow, while truth remains eternal. Chapter 3, Among the Swine and the Husks. Identifying with limitation, the lowest moment in the parable of the Prodigal Son was not when he squandered his wealth, nor even when he left his father's house. The true depth of tragedy came when he sat among the swine, craving the husks that not even the animals would share. This is the symbolic picture of the soul's state, when it not only suffers lack, but believes it deserves that lack. It is the moment when dignity gives way to resignation. When the soul identifies itself with limitation, this identification with limitation is a subtle process, never happening in a single day, but slowly eating away at the self. It begins when a person accepts a wage that insults their dignity merely to survive, and then comforts themselves by saying, "At least I still have a job." It continues when one accepts unjust conditions and convinces themselves there is no other choice. Each concession is like a chain added to an invisible shackle, gradually erasing the memory that they are the child of abundance, until, at last, they sit among the swine of lowly thoughts, feeding on the husks of illusion, and believe this is their destiny. This condition is not confined to material poverty. It appears whenever you believe that limitation is your identity. A talented person who neglects their gift, believing they are not good enough to pursue their dream, is living on husks, a soul longing for love, yet settling for shallow relationships out of fear of loneliness, is also sitting among the swine of self-debasement. Whenever you define yourself by outward conditions rather than inner dignity, you have identified with darkness. Scripture tells of the widow in the Book of Kings who had nothing but a small jar of oil and thought she had nothing at all. That very thought was identification with limitation. She did not see the unlimited potential in that jar until the prophet reminded her to open her eyes. That story repeats itself today. How many times have you told yourself, I have nothing, I am not enough, I am powerless? Each of those statements is like another husk you put into your mouth, feeding not the body but the illusion of poverty. The danger of this identification is that it breeds resignation. People mistake resignation for strength, thinking endurance is courage, but in truth it is despair in disguise. When the soul believes it deserves nothing better, it locks the doors through which abundance longs to flow. Without awakening, an entire life can slip by feeding on spiritual husks, while the true inheritance remains waiting close at hand. How then do you break free from this condition? The answer lies in the law of forgiveness. For identification with limitation usually grows from a hidden sense of guilt. A person tells themselves they have failed too greatly, sinned too much, squandered too many chances, and so must now accept misery. It is that guilt which enslaves them to limitation. Forgiveness cuts the cord. Forgiveness does not mean excusing mistakes, but declaring that mistakes no longer have the right to define you. When you truly forgive yourself, you reclaim dignity. You rise from the swine, shake off the mire, and remember that you are a son, not a hireling. A useful practice is to write down your own jars of oil, the talents, skills, opportunities, and ideas you have neglected. It may be creativity, communication, patience, kindness. Each is a vessel waiting to be filled. Write them out, and instead of saying, I have nothing, begin to affirm, I have many jars of oil, and the oil of God is ready to pour forth. Each time you affirm this, you break another layer of the hypnosis of limitation. Also remember to keep silence in this work. The widow was instructed to shut the door when the oil began to flow. This means the renewal of consciousness must be protected from the eyes of doubt and the voices of pessimism. Do your inner work quietly, allowing new abundance to grow without interruption. You were not born to live among swine or feed on empty husks. You were created to sit at the Father's banquet table, to live with dignity and abundance. When you cease to identify with limitation and remember your true identity, everything changes. The issue is not that you need something new to be given, but that you must stop believing in what is false. The moment you forgive yourself and see that every failure was only a lesson, your spirit will rise. The belief in limitation will melt away, and light will return. No longer will you search for husks, but you will lift your eyes toward the Father's house, where the abundant feast has always been prepared. And as you walk in that awareness, you will see that you were never truly lacking. You only needed to stop feeding on husks and start living as the heir who has always owned the inheritance. Forgiveness and the unfolding of potential. No chain weighs heavier than the one forged by the soul itself through guilt and self-condemnation. A person may stumble, may fail, may walk into the dead end of wrong choices, but the true tragedy begins only when they believe they are no longer worthy to rise again. In that state, they become prisoners of memory, identifying with limitation and resigning themselves to life's scraps as if that were their final destiny. This is why forgiveness becomes the key not only to release the past, but to awaken the dormant potentials within Forgiveness here is not merely a moral act, but a metaphysical work. To forgive is to declare to the subconscious that the past no longer has authority to define the present. You may have squandered like the prodigal son. You may have chosen paths that caused pain for yourself and others. But no mistake can strip away your divine identity. When you forgive, you do not deny that errors occurred. You deny them the privilege of ruling your destiny. Forgiveness is the act of restoring dignity, reaffirming that you are still a child of the Father, still an heir, and still fully capable of stepping into the banquet of abundance. When forgiveness is extended, a silent yet wondrous phenomenon unfolds. The burden drops, the mind grows light, and energy long buried begins to flow again. Many do not fail for lack of talent, but because so much of their energy is locked in regret, they keep circling around what was lost, instead of seeing the doors opening before them. But the moment forgiveness enters, that energy is released, creativity flows once more, and hidden potential begins to rise. A simple yet profound practice is to write down the mistakes that still haunt you and then read aloud a declaration of forgiveness. For example, I forgive myself for missing that opportunity. I forgive myself for harming myself. I forgive myself for believing in limitation. When such declarations are spoken, the subconscious receives a new command. You no longer identify with failure. You identify with divine identity. As this becomes an inner reality, forgotten potential stirs and awakens. The story of the widow with her small jar of oil bears witness. At first she said she had nothing, but in truth, she had something precious. What she lacked was not oil, but the right perception of it. Forgiveness works the same way. When you forgive, you shift perception. You no longer see yourself as helpless, but recognize that within your house is an inexhaustible supply. The empty jars, symbols of unused abilities, begin to be filled as you open yourself to receive. And the oil, the life of God, flows only when the veil of guilt is lifted. Forgiveness does not stop with yourself. It extends to others. Perhaps you carry a wound caused by someone else, and that wound blocks your ability to use your higher gifts. As long as you cling to resentment, you are bound in the cycle of old emotions, leaving no space for creativity or joy. But when you forgive that person, you are not excusing their wrong. You are freeing yourself from the chain. You open the door for spiritual energy to pour in. And from that point, you can rise into new dimensions of potential. Forgiveness and the unfolding of potential always go hand in hand. No one can create fully while chained to regret or bitterness. Just as a river cannot flow while blocked by a dam, potential cannot surge forth while the mind is damned by guilt. Forgiveness removes the obstruction, and when it is lifted, the waters rush free, and you begin to live in a new rhythm where every day becomes an opportunity to express the abundance already within. Ask yourself now, what remains unforgiven within me? What mistakes am I still clutching? Who is it that I have not released? The answers to those questions are the keys that unlock potential. And when you dare to speak forgiveness not only with your lips but with your heart, you will discover that your power was never lost, only veiled. You were not born to live in lowliness, nor to endlessly repeat sentences of self-condemnation. You were born to shine, to create, to walk in freedom. Forgiveness is the road back to that freedom. And when freedom enters, potential unfolds as naturally as a seed meeting rain. Ideas will spring forth. Opportunities will appear. Creative energy will surge. This is not something newly granted to you. It is simply the return of what has always been yours. Forgiveness is the highest spiritual act one can perform for oneself. It not only liberates the past, it opens the future. It lifts you from the swine and the husks and sets you again upon the path to the Father's banquet. There, you are no longer a beggar, but an heir, no longer bound by limits, but alive in fullness. And from that place, every potential within you blossoms, not by force, but as naturally as sunlight breaking through clouds, declaring that your abundance was never lost. It was only waiting to be revealed through forgiveness. Chapter 4, Awakening, the illuminating moment. The turning point in the story of the prodigal son was not when he was destitute, nor when he sat in despair among the swine, but in the moment he awakened. Scripture records that he came to himself and said, "How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough to spare, while I perish here with hunger?" This was not an external event, but a spark in the mind, a flash of truth breaking through illusion, a single moment of recognition that his present state did not reflect his true nature. A brief instant, yet powerful enough to shatter the chains of false identification. Awakening does not come from pity, nor from fear, but from honest recognition. It is the silent admission. I have thought wrongly. I have believed wrongly. I have lived as though I were not the child of the Father. Yet the instant that realization dawns, a light breaks forth. This is the illuminating moment, when the soul remembers its essence. It requires no elaborate ritual, no years of waiting, only 1 second of seeing clearly, and when truth flashes, the chains of error dissolve. For many, this moment comes unexpectedly. One may struggle for years in debt, in guilt, in disappointment, and then one day, in stillness, a thought rises, "No, this is not who I am. I am not a pauper. I am the child of abundance." That single thought opens a new door. Like a switch being thrown, darkness loses its hold, for light is now present. The miracle of the illuminating moment lies not in complexity, but in immediacy. It does not require a long process. It requires only the courage to face reality and acknowledge that a greater truth is waiting. Awakening is the beginning of all transformation. You may recite countless prayers. You may read many books, but without awakening, all remains theory. Awakening is the moment you truly return. It is the recognition that life does not change by chance or fortune, but by a decision of the mind, and once that decision is made, the universe itself begins to answer. In spiritual practice, awakening unfolds in 4 steps. The first is recognition. This is when the soul admits, "I have gone astray. I have believed in lack." It is not self-condemnation, but acknowledgement of truth. The second is renunciation. Once you see the error, you cut off the flow of energy that sustained it by declaring, "I will not accept this condition as my destiny. I refuse to let lack define me." The third is receptivity. This is the state of openness. When you say, "I welcome guidance. I open myself for good to flow in." And the fourth is conviction. This is the quiet certainty that what you affirm has already begun to operate, that the law is at work, that change is underway. Awakening is not a dramatic display for others, but a silent shift in the depths. It is like a mother who knows she has conceived, though outward signs are not yet visible. Within, there is an unshakable certainty. The awakened soul no longer frets over when or how, because it already knows the truth has taken root within. Remember, you do not need a grand miracle to confirm that you have changed. A single true thought flashing in the mind is enough to begin a new cycle. It is that moment when you whisper within, "I will rise. I no longer identify with failure. I return to my true dignity." And when those words resound in the heart, Heaven responds, for you have chosen to return. Many have witnessed the power of this moment. A woman on the brink of losing her home, with no way forward, prayed one night and declared within, I know this house is mine by divine law. The next day, unexpected doors opened, and the debt was paid. A man crushed by business failure, in despair, declared, I am no longer a victim. I am the heir of abundance, and a new flow began to move in his life. These were not accidents, but the inevitable results of awakening. This illuminating moment is available to anyone. It does not discriminate by wealth, education, or status. It only requires a mind willing to admit the truth and to choose to return. And once it happens, you cannot go back. You have tasted the light, and darkness can no longer deceive you as before. Awakening is the true beginning of the journey home. It is the reminder that you never lost the inheritance, that every limitation was only illusion. In awakening, you rise, you step away from the swine, and you begin the walk back to the banquet of the Father, and from that instant, even if outward things have not yet shifted, something within you has changed forever. Chapter 5, The Road Back. Prayer with method. Awakening is the beginning, but for the soul to truly return and remain in the Father's house, it needs a steady path, a method that anchors consciousness to truth. Many have known moments of sudden illumination, yet allowed old habits to pull them back into doubt and fear. Therefore, the road back cannot rest on fleeting emotions, but must be built on spiritual discipline, where prayer becomes not a ritual of words, but a method, a rhythm of life. Prayer with method is not the empty repetition of phrases, nor the performance of outward rites. It is the art of restoring the flow between the human mind and the divine source. It demands steadfastness, clarity, and uncompromising honesty in every thought. Each morning, each hour of the day, and in every moment when the mind is tempted by worry, prayer becomes the centering force, reminding you that nothing stands between you and the infinite life. The structure of prayer with method consists of 3 clear steps. The first is denial. This is the cleansing of the mind from false ideas. It is the firm declaration that no obstacle has true reality, that fear, disease, or poverty are but shadows. You say to yourself, nothing stands between me and good. No separation exists. The second is affirmation. Once the veil has been cleared, you immediately fill the space with truth. You declare, the Father is my instant supply. Every need is already met in him. And the third is holy silence, where words cease, and you simply sit in presence, letting the mind dissolve into the current of life. This practice is like the 3 legs of a stool. Remove one, and it collapses. Denial severs the influence of collective suggestion. Affirmation redirects spiritual energy. Silence reconnects you with the source, where infinite strength is restored. This is the power of the voice within, not just a voice you hear, but a space you return to. Asterisk. It is not merely words spoken, but the realm you step into, where the soul remembers truth, where every fear melts away. The strength of methodical prayer lies in its regularity. You cannot pray only in crisis and expect lasting results. Just as the body requires daily nourishment, the mind requires constant cleansing and reorientation. A person may devote 5 minutes in the morning to deny false thoughts, 5 more to affirm truth, and 20 to rest in silence. This is not a burden, but a spiritual investment. Over time, you will find the mind sharper, lighter, and resilient against any challenge. Methodical prayer also keeps us from restless waiting. When you plant a seed, you do not dig it up each day to see if it has sprouted. You trust the laws of nature. In the same way, when you deny, affirm, and rest in silence, you are planting seed in the subconscious. You need not control how it grows. You need only trust that life is at work. And then, on days you least expect, the results appear naturally. In times of hardship, many have practiced this discipline and seen doors open. A widow raising 2 children alone decided to rise earlier each morning. Before sunrise, she spent 5 minutes denying fear, 5 minutes affirming supply, and 20 minutes in silence. She did not demand a miracle. She simply practiced faithfully, and soon an unexpected job offer arrived, providing steady income and carrying her family through. This was not chance, but the inevitable fruit of a mind aligned with principle. You too can begin today. Each morning declare, nothing separates me from good. Each afternoon, affirm, the Father is my instant supply. I lack nothing. Each evening sit in silence, quietly reminding yourself that you are home. Do this not as a heavy ritual, but as a breath, the natural rhythm of spiritual life. The road back is not a hurried race, but a steady, certain journey, and each step of methodical prayer is a step closer to the Father's house, where the banquet has been prepared since before you were born. As you remain steadfast on this path, nothing can hinder you. Every limit, every collective suggestion, every chain of the past becomes illusion. Only truth remains, that you are a child, that you are the heir, and that you are home. Chapter 6, the Father's embrace, dissolving financial shame. The moment the prodigal son returned, Scripture tells us that while he was still far off, the Father saw him, was moved with compassion, ran to him, threw his arms around his neck, and kissed him tenderly. There were no words of reproach, no judgment, no record of offenses, only an embrace, only the affirmation that this child had never lost his place in the Father's heart. That image is more than a touching story. It is the very essence of divine law. When man returns in consciousness, he is not condemned, he is restored. And this truth is the key to dissolving one of the heaviest burdens, pressing upon humanity: financial shame. Financial shame is not the absence of money in the pocket, but the shadow in the mind. It is the whisper that says, you have failed, you have squandered, you do not deserve prosperity anymore. Many have paid off their debts, rebuilt their lives, and yet deep within carry the scar of shame that prevents them from enjoying or expanding abundance. They pray, they affirm, yet in the subconscious there lingers the voice, I am not worthy. This invisible weight locks the door and stifles the flow of supply. The Father's embrace symbolizes the truth that such shame exists only in the human mind, never in God. He keeps no ledger of debts, records, no financial mistakes, withdraws no blessing because of miscalculations. All he does is wait for you to return in recognition, to then embrace you and restore your dignity. This truth must be written on the heart, for only when shame is released can one step fully into the current of financial freedom across decades. I have seen that people are not bound so much by material lack as by inner shame. A businessman who once went bankrupt later rebuilt his fortune, but lived haunted by the fear that failure would return. That fear shrank his vision, made him refuse opportunities, and bound him in limitation. Only when he learned to bless his past failures, to view them as lessons of growth, did he break the cycle and step into a new chapter. This is the principle of reverse blessing. Instead of cursing the past, you look upon it with gratitude. You say, I thank that event because it awakened me. I thank that loss because it taught me to discern the true from the false. When you bless failure, you dismantle shame. You no longer see yourself as guilty, but as a student of life. And from that standpoint, the energy once trapped in shame is released, becoming a fresh current of prosperity. Some have practiced by writing down every financial event that had left them haunted or ashamed. They read through the list and declared, I forgive myself, I bless this experience, I release it. They repeated this day after day until the heart grew lighter, until the memories no longer appeared as wounds but as stepping stones. Then new opportunities opened. Debts once thought unmovable dissolved in unexpected ways, not because they suddenly became more skillful, but because the burden of shame had been lifted. The Father's embrace is the eternal reminder that restoration requires no mediation through guilt. It comes the moment you return and recognize you are still His child. God does not require you to pay in suffering, nor to punish yourself. He only requires you to remember, and the instant you remember, shame falls away. You step into the embrace, and in that embrace you find not only comfort, but the affirmation that you have the right to live free, prosperous, and joyful. Financial shame is the vanity of the ego, holding man in the loop of self-reproach. But the Father's embrace dissolves it all. For in Him there is no old debt, only present love. When you truly step into that embrace in consciousness, you cease to look upon money with fear, but with confidence as a child, entrusted with the inheritance. Remember this, you need not strive to prove your worth for the Father's love. You need not pay with blood, sweat, or tears to buy back prosperity. You need only release shame and allow the divine embrace to hold you. From that moment on, you are no longer one who lives in financial fear, but an heir managing divine inheritance in freedom. In that embrace, you will discover peace instead of anxiety, opportunity instead of dead ends, abundance instead of limitation. The Father's embrace is the eternal confirmation that shame has no power. Only truth endures. And the truth is this: you have never lost your inheritance. You need only remember and live fully in it. Chapter 7, The Ring and the Sandals, Spiritual Authority in Economics. When the prodigal son returned, the Father did more than embrace him in forgiveness. He restored his position with visible signs. He commanded the servants to bring the best robe to clothe him, to place a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. These were not mere gestures of affection. They were public confirmation that this son was no beggar, but reinstated as an heir, entrusted once again with authority over the estate. In the culture of ancient Israel, the ring engraved with the family seal symbolized legal authority. It was used to ratify decisions, sign contracts, and confirm ownership. Sandals, meanwhile, were a mark of freedom, for only slaves went barefoot. Thus, with ring and sandals, the son was not only forgiven, but reinstated in power. This is the secret for anyone seeking financial freedom today, to understand and practice their spiritual authority. Have you ever wondered why some seem to struggle endlessly with money, while others walk with a quiet assurance? The difference is not always talent or opportunity. It is identity. One who still carries the mentality of a slave will live in fear of loss, no matter how much they possess. But one who knows they are a child, wearing the ring and sandals, you can begin with nothing and still move forward in freedom and authority. And what of you? Do you live as a son with a ring, or as one still barefoot in your consciousness? You need not answer me, answer yourself. And I thank you for being here, for listening not only with your ears, but with your heart, which longs to reclaim its true identity. Spiritual authority in economics is not the power to dominate but the freedom not to be dominated by economics. It is the ability to stand steady in crisis without losing faith. It is the certainty that supply does not flow from markets or salaries, but from the inexhaustible stream of God. One who lives in that consciousness does not act out of lack, but out of creativity and freedom, and the universe always responds to freedom with open doors. The ring is the reminder that every thought you plant in the subconscious carries the seal of authority. A decision born of a poverty consciousness is stamped with the same power as a decision affirming abundance. You cannot avoid signing. The only question is, upon what document are you placing your seal? Are you endorsing the decree of limitation or the covenant of prosperity? Every word you speak, every thought you hold, bears the force of the ring. Once you grasp this, you will become both careful and confident in what you affirm. The sandals symbolize freedom of action. One with spiritual authority no longer shuffles forward as a fearful slave, but walks as a child who knows the path is prepared. The sandals give you an attitude that every step you take leads toward good, that you are not imprisoned by circumstances, and it is precisely this attitude that draws opportunity for you. Walk not in timidity, but upright, free, and creative. Through the years, I have known many who practiced this spiritual authority in economics and saw transformation. One man, once a low-paid laborer, decided each morning before work to close his eyes and imagine placing the ring of authority on his hand and the sandals of freedom on his feet. He would whisper, "Every step I take today is guided by good. Every decision I sign bears the seal of abundance." Within months, he was promoted, and soon after, he launched a business in the field he loved. You may try this yourself. Each morning, envision placing the ring on your finger and declare, "From this day, every thought I hold carries the seal of prosperity." Then envision putting on the sandals and say, "I walk in freedom. I am no longer a slave to fear." Practice this faithfully, and you will feel your inner posture change. And as it does, outer conditions will change with it. The ring and the sandals are not merely ancient symbols in a parable. They are reminders for our own age. In a world of uncertainty, with economies shifting daily, only consciousness of spiritual authority provides a secure foundation. When you know who you are, you no longer fear what is outside. When you act from sonship, you are no longer confined by the mentality of servitude. Wear the ring of right thought. Walk in the sandals of free action. Then you will find yourself not merely surviving the economic life, but moving in true abundance, and every decision, every step you take, instead of being dictated by fear, will bear the bold imprint of a consciousness restored to its rightful authority. Chapter 8, The Elder Brother, Comparison and Envy. In the parable, when the younger son was restored and the household celebrated, the elder brother grew angry. He refused to enter the feast, unable to rejoice in his brother's return. His attitude revealed a subtle yet dangerous spiritual disease, comparison and envy. He said to his father, "All these years I have served you and never disobeyed your commands, yet you never gave me even a young goat to celebrate with my friends." His words exposed a mind tied to labor and reward, a belief that good must be earned, that grace is limited and distributed according to merit. This is the mindset that shuts down the flow of abundance. Comparison is always an implicit denial that good is infinite. When the elder brother saw his sibling welcomed, instead of recognizing it as proof of unconditional love, he saw it as a threat to his own share. He believed that if his brother gained, he must lose. He believed that blessing was a finite pie, that more for another meant less for him. And it was precisely this belief that kept him outside the feast, not because the Father barred him, but because he refused to join. Such is the way comparison and envy still operate today. How many times have we seen another's success and felt our hearts contract? How many times have we heard of a friend's promotion, a new home, or a joyful relationship, and our first reaction was not celebration, but doubt and bitterness? Each time we shut ourselves off from the flow of abundance. For the universe cannot fill a vessel already full of judgment. When you envy, you do not take away another's blessing, you only push yourself further from the banquet already prepared for you. The elder brother represents a morality based on merit, a self-righteousness that assumes only those who labor enough, give enough, or obey enough deserve reward. But the principle of life does not operate on such terms. Abundance is an inheritance, not a wage. The Father did not tell the elder son, because you have not done enough, I withhold from you. On the contrary, he said, Son, you are always with me, and all that I have is yours. This is the truth the elder brother could not see. Everything was already his. But comparison and resentment blinded him. The subtlety of envy lies not only in desiring what others have, but in believing our own efforts have not been rewarded fairly. It makes us accountants of merit, endlessly tallying, measuring, and forgetting that blessing flows not from calculation but from presence in the Father's house. The elder brother was in the house, but his mind was outside, dwelling in the land of comparison. That is the greatest tragedy, to live in abundance and yet feel impoverished. Look deeper, and you see that envy and comparison are not merely feelings, but a worldview. They insist that good is scarce, that the universe must divide, that another's gain is your loss. This stands in direct contradiction to the law of life, for the law of life is infinite. When you accept infinity, another's success becomes proof that the law is active, and therefore it can also be active in you. But when you believe in scarcity, another's blessing becomes proof that you are forgotten. The cure for envy is not suppression, but a shift in perspective. When you witness another blessed, see it as evidence that life is at work. See it as a signal that blessing is near at hand. Each time you see another's success, practice saying within, thank you, for this proves the law of good is flowing, and my portion is on its way. When you bless another's success, you open the door for your own. The truth to remember is that no one can take what is yours. The younger son's restoration took nothing from the elder. The ring, the sandals, and the robe given to him were not subtracted from his brother's inheritance. In the Father's house, there is no shortage, nor division. Each has a full portion. When your mind truly accepts this, comparison dissolves and joy returns naturally. The elder brother standing outside the feast is the picture of souls who dwell in blessing yet feel barren because they measure themselves against others. The message is clear. You do not have to remain outside. You can enter the moment you release comparison, and when you do, you will see that everything has always been yours, nothing missing, nothing lost, nothing diminished by another's gain. Comparison and envy are a locked door, bolted from within. Only by opening it with trust in the infinite can you join the feast of life. And from that moment on, instead of looking at others with suspicion, you will see them as mirrors reflecting the truth that grace is unlimited, and that you too live in the very same stream. Chapter 9, The Miracle of Oil, the Silent Multiplication. In the Book of Kings, we read of a poor widow who came to the prophet Elisha in desperation. Her husband had died, leaving debts, and the creditor threatened to enslave her children. When Elisha asked what she had in her house, she answered, nothing at all except a small jar of oil. It was from that humble beginning that the miracle unfolded. The prophet told her to borrow many empty vessels, shut the door, and pour out the oil, and the oil continued to flow until every vessel was filled. Behind this simple tale lies a profound spiritual secret. Abundance is always present. It only waits to be recognized, trusted, and set in motion. The miracle of oil teaches us that multiplication comes not from without, but from within. The jar represents potential, the hidden good already present within every soul. When we look at life and say, I have nothing, that is the very moment we overlook the oil waiting to be used. The oil began to flow only when the widow acted, when she took the little she had and placed it into the process of faith. Thus, the law of multiplication does not depend on how much we hold, but on whether we dare to begin with it. In today's life, many sit lamenting their lack without realizing they hold a precious jar of oil. It may be a neglected ability, an unexplored idea, a relationship, yet unappreciated. When we despise what we have, the oil does not flow. When we give thanks, use it, and dedicate it, the stream opens. Each time you write a page, plant a seed, speak an encouraging word, you are pouring oil, and the law of life guarantees that the oil will not cease. As long as there remain empty vessels to fill, the empty vessels represent capacity to receive. The more vessels the widow borrowed, the longer the oil flowed. So it is with the human mind. If filled with doubt, bitterness, and limitation, there is no room for the inflow of good. But when the mind expands, making space for faith, hope, and vision, it becomes a vessel of blessing. As many vessels, so much flow, not because God measures sparingly, but because the mind itself sets the limits. Notice, too, that the miracle of oil occurred not in the marketplace, but behind a closed door. This is no minor detail. The greatest multiplications take place in silence. When the widow shut the door, she shut out the skeptical gaze, the mocking voices, the curiosity of the crowd. She created a pure space where faith could operate. So it is with us. We must close the door within, guard the silence of the heart, for only in that silence can the oil pour without end. This is the power of the voice within, not just a sound you hear, but a space you return to. Asterisk, it is the inner voice that resounds in silence, not a fleeting word, but a sacred room where the miracle quietly forms. In practice, this principle has proven itself countless times. A widow in New Jersey, with nothing but the simple skill of sewing, began each morning by writing down 3 ideas, calling them her empty vessels. She prayed over them and took action. At first, it was just a few mended garments for neighbors, then a small sewing class in her community. But as time passed, the stream widened, and from that little room she built a workshop that sustained her family. The oil never ran dry, because she kept pouring out and kept gathering new vessels. This truth holds in every field. Use your talents, and you are given more. Share your love, and love multiplies. Offer your creativity, and fresh creativity springs forth. But if you hoard the oil in fear, the flow ceases. The miracle of oil is not about pleading for new supply, but about pouring out the supply already in hand, and as you do, it multiplies. The miracle also reminds us of a vital law. Abundance is always proportional to faith and action. The widow could have chosen to sit in complaint, but she chose to borrow vessels, to shut the door, to pour the oil. These small acts unlocked the unimaginable. The universe does not respond to cries of despair, but to faith expressed in action. Today, when you face financial or emotional hardship, you may follow the same map. Step 1. Recognize your jar of oil value, what you already have, rather than despise it. Step 2. Borrow vessels, expand your mind, and be ready to receive. Step 3. Shut the door, keep silence, and hold faith within. Step 4. Pour the oil act with what is in your hand. No matter how small, persist, and you will see that the flow does not stop. The miracle of oil is not merely a story of the past, it is an eternal principle. Multiplication always occurs in silence. When one dares to begin with the small and trusts the infinite source. Each of us holds a jar of oil, and each of us has the right to let it flow. The only question is whether we recognize it, expand our vessels, and find the courage to begin. When you take this path, you discover that the miracle is not some outside event beyond your will, but the inevitable result of faith joined with action, and then, with a smile, you will realize the jar was never empty, for it never belonged to limitation, but to the endless abundance of God. Chapter 10. The Law of Increase and the Invisible Supply. One of the deepest illusions carried in the human mind is the belief that wealth comes only through visible channels. People believe money comes from a paycheck, profit from markets, harvest from weather, and when one channel is blocked, they panic as if life itself has been cut off. But that is only surface vision. In truth, every visible stream is only a branch. The true river is the invisible supply that flows from God. When you understand this, you cease to fear the fluctuations of economies, for you know the source of life cannot run dry. The law of increase is one of the fundamental laws of the universe. It teaches that whatever you bless and appreciate expands. Conversely, whatever you criticize, resent, or fear contracts. This is not a moral suggestion, but a mechanism of consciousness. When you receive a single coin and give thanks, that coin becomes a seed, and seeds always multiply. But if you receive a great sum of money and hold it in fear and doubt, it becomes a burden, and burdens are consumed. The invisible supply is the unbroken current, ever present, unchanging. A man who loses his job may think he has lost his source, but in reality he has only lost a channel. The source remains, waiting to flow through new avenues opened by faith and right attitude. Like a mighty river, if one branch is blocked, the water will find another way. When you cling to a single channel, you close the door of your mind, preventing the flow. But when you trust the invisible source, you throw open every door, and life finds its way to you. The law of increase is also called the law of blessing. Whatever you touch with gratitude expands. Observe, those who honor every opportunity, every income, every relationship often find life becoming richer. But those who complain, compare, and doubt, though they hold much, always feel poor, for their minds plant only the seeds of lack, and the harvest must match the seed. There is an ancient practice of great power called the spiritual tithe. Each time you receive income, you set aside in thought a tenth, dedicating it to the source as an act of thanksgiving. You need not physically give it away, but in consciousness you have turned it into seed. Then you sign a receipt in imagination, affirming that it will return 100-fold. In doing this, you are not only practicing gratitude, but declaring to the subconscious that you live by the law of increase, and the universe always responds to such faith. During the hard years of the Great Depression, farmers in Kansas practiced this law. Though poor and facing uncertain harvests, they decided that every time they gathered crops, however small, they would dedicate a portion in thought to God. Soon, their fields began to flourish beyond expectation. their yields surpassing neighboring farms. They had no better tools, no richer soil, only one difference. They lived by trust in the invisible supply, not fear, and the invisible supply multiplied what they had. This law holds in every area of life. Bless your health, and health increases. Bless your knowledge, and knowledge expands. Bless your friendships, and they deepen and multiply. All follow one principle. What you honor grows. What you despise fades. This is the law of increase, working silently but certainly, impartial to belief or unbelief. Invisible supply is no comforting theory, but a reality you can experience. When you shift your attitude, even the smallest things become miracles. An unexpected gift, a chance encounter, a surprising invitation, all are evidence that the source is at work, and as you continue to bless and give thanks, the flow widens. Here lies a secret to engrave upon your heart. You need not beg the invisible source to give, for it has never ceased to give. Your only task is to place yourself in the stream through faith and blessing. Like one who carries a vessel to the river, your work is not to create the water, but to set the vessel in its place. And when it is set, the water flows in of itself. The law of increase and the invisible supply remind us that prosperity does not depend on economies, governments, or world events. It depends on how we see, believe, and honor. When you live in blessing, you step into the rhythm of the law, and in that rhythm, abundance continually unfolds. Remember, the true supply never lies outside, it is always within. When you awaken to this and live by the law of increase, you no longer fear lack, for you know that in this universe there is no scarcity. There are only minds that have forgotten they stand already in the infinite stream. And when you remember, when you bless even the little, you will see abundance not only return, but overflow, multiplying far beyond all expectation. Chapter 11, Debt Cancelled Through the Consciousness of Freedom. No chain weighs heavier than the chain of debt a person carries in the mind, beyond numbers on paper. Debt is first an image etched into consciousness, pressing upon one with fear, burden, and dependence. It is identification with debt that makes it real, not only in finances, but in the soul. People assume that to be free of debt, they must first accumulate enough money to pay it off. But on the spiritual plane, the truth is the opposite. Debt dissolves the moment the consciousness of freedom is restored, when you cease to see yourself as a debtor and begin to see yourself as an heir of liberty. What torments man is not the figure itself, but the belief that the figure defines his worth. When a debt is held in mind with worry, it grows larger with each thought. The more one frets, the more one feeds the image of being bound, and the subconscious responds by producing circumstances to confirm that belief. In contrast, when you choose to see debt as temporary, without ultimate authority, the bonds begin to loosen. Freedom begins not in the bank, but in awareness year after year. Many are trapped in the question, how will I pay? Through whom? By what means? And this very question enslaves them to fear. They are like the farmer who plants seed, but digs it up daily to see if it has sprouted, drying the soil. The law does not require anxious supervision, but trust. When you plant the image of freedom, you must let the law do its work. You need not know the means, for the channel belongs to the invisible. A being may merge, an opportunity may open, a debt may be unexpectedly erased. Your task is not to control the channel, but to hold steady the consciousness that freedom already is. A merchant in the Bronx in the 1942nd once told his story. He had incurred heavy debt, expanding his business before the war, then was dragged down by the market. For years he lived in fear, counting interest due day by day. Then he heard one sentence that changed his life. Do not concern yourself with the channel. Hold the image of freedom. From then on, each morning he affirmed, I am a child of God. This debt is already resolved in the unseen. I live in freedom. 6 weeks later, his bank merged with another, and his entire loan was cancelled in a restructuring package. He did not plead. He did not bargain. He simply held to faith. It was not luck. It was the law operating when the consciousness of freedom was restored. This principle can be practiced through a simple yet powerful method. Envision the end result. Each day, close your eyes and see in your hand a statement stamped. Paid in full. Feel the relief. Breathe, the peace of one already free. As you repeat this image, day after day, the subconscious accepts it as reality, and circumstances begin to arrange themselves to mirror the new image. This is not fantasy, it is sowing seed for the law to bring forth. A 40-day exercise has helped many change their condition. Each morning, begin by affirming, I am a child of God. Freedom belongs to me. This debt is already cancelled in the invisible, and I accept only freedom. Then read a passage of scripture, such as the parable of the Prodigal Son or the miracle of oil, letting your mind soak in the principle. Spend a few minutes visualizing the zero balance, then close with thanksgiving. If practiced faithfully for 40 days, the subconscious reshapes and outer conditions shift accordingly. Some ask, but what about responsibility, about law, about contracts? The answer is that spiritual law does not deny reality. It redefines it from within. When you change consciousness, you do not escape responsibility. You allow grace to open solutions. It may be restructuring, unexpected income, or new opportunity. The common thread is that the result arrives by channels you could not have planned. Debt is cancelled through the consciousness of freedom, not by tricks or denial, but by breaking the inner slavery to fear. Debt is only an illusion of separation, a mist in the mind. The moment you cease feeding that mist with worry and dread, it evaporates, and at that very instant, you step out of the prison of your own making into the freedom already yours. Remember, debt is never your identity. It does not define your value. It cannot bind your soul. It cannot block the abundance given to you from the beginning. When you stand in the consciousness of freedom, every debt becomes nothing more than a fading trace of a dream. And when the light of truth shines, that dream dissolves like morning mist before the sun. You were not born to live in fear or in bondage to debt. You were born to walk in freedom, in abundance, and in the divine authority of a child of God. The miracle of oil has never ceased. For the source of life within, you can never run dry. The law of increase is still in motion, waiting only for your faith and your action. And the banquet of life is still prepared for you with the ring, the sandals, and the Father's embrace. From this day forward, let go of comparison. Let go of fear. Let go of self-imposed chains. Step into the light of a new awareness. As you change within, the world around you will reflect that change. And you will discover that the inheritance was never lost. It has only been waiting for you to return and claim it.